We're calling it Industrial Cybersecurity Simplified, protection to keep manufacturers operating at full capacity. My name is Jim Barry, Regional Account Manager at TX1, and I'll be helping to moderate today's training. Before we begin, I want to go through a few housekeeping notes and a couple of items. Please note, this webinar is being recorded and it will be made available following the training. Secondly, to avoid interruptions, we have audio and video disabled for all attendees. That being said, we encourage you to contact us through the Q&A widget available in the top menu bar. Your questions will be sent to the TX1 team that's assisting me today, and we'll try to answer all of your questions at the end of the presentation. If there are any questions that we don't get to, we'll certainly follow up directly with you after the webinar. If you happen to be viewing this webinar on demand, since it is being recorded, and have any questions, please reach out to me directly. My contact information will be on a slide upcoming. So without further delay, I'd like to introduce you to the rest of the TX1 team that will be presenting with me today. So that's me, Jim Barry, on the left side. I've got Austen Byers, Technical Director for the Americas, there in the middle, and then Quentin Kantaris, Solutions Architect for the Americas on the right. So let's take a quick look at today's agenda, give you an idea of what we're going to cover, and we'll jump right in at that point. So what's in store for today? We're going to hopefully help you understand a little bit better the growing cyber threat landscape for OT. We're going to identify some of the differences in cybersecurity strategies between OT and IT, and we're going to try to show you a little bit about TX1 Network cybersecurity solutions and how they're purpose-built for OT manufacturing environments. And then, as I noted, we're going to have some Q&A at the very end. We're also going to show you a special promotion, which I think you're going to be very interested in, and we'll talk about that closer to the end of the presentation. Quentin, why don't you jump to the next slide, please? So just a little bit about really Trend Micro, TX1, the differences between. A lot of you are familiar with Trend Micro, maybe not so much with TX1. But Trend Micro lives in the IT security portion of your network, level 4, level 5, DMZ, whereas TX1 is much more focused on level 3 on down. We're going to show you a little bit more of where we play in those levels. And to help with that, I'm going to introduce Austen Byers, Technical Director for the Americas. Take it away, Austen.
Thanks, Jim. Yeah, so kind of like Jim was explaining, the goal of this is to for anyone this is their first step into securing the OT space or the operations technology environments. Kind of want to start at the elementary level. So some of you may have heard this before, others may have not. So, but the idea is to get a good grasp on what the OT environment is like today, what it was like in the past, what got us to this point of needing dedicated OT security, and then also going over the things that we need to be looking out for and all the things that we need to be stopping and trying to prevent that's going on in these environments. So it's important to explain the differences between IT and OT, since they're very, very different in the function and operations and the things that they're looking to achieve. For instance, with IT machines, these are dealing in information, information technology is what IT stands for. So these are machines that could be your laptop sitting in front of you, a mail server, web server, any machine that sits in the carpeted areas of the environment or the company, whereas OT machines are more on the shop floor area. These are any machine that has a specific function or an operation. In manufacturing, since this is what we're focusing on today, which is manufacturing, it will be engineering workstations, program logic controllers, robotics machines, HMIs, SCADA machines, those types of devices. But basically, it's any machine that has a specific operation or a goal to achieve, that is an OT machine. So after understanding the differences in the machines, it's easier to see that they require different types of security measures and that their security needs are very different. IT security is based on the CIA model, which stands for confidentiality, integrity, and availability in that order. Confidentiality being the first priority in IT environments. Companies do not want their sensitive data to be exfiltrated or encrypted. So obviously, confidentiality is that main priority. If an endpoint is infected on the IT side, that IT person can simply just take that machine offline, regardless of what that machine's function was, whether I needed to send an email or join a conference call. We're going to pull you offline so that way we don't infect anyone else. In OT environments, they don't have that luxury. A lot of times these OT machines are performing extremely important functions, whether it's a safety device keeping people alive or a mission critical, high revenue producing PLC on a manufacturing floor. So an OT person's main focus is availability. They have to keep that machine online and producing at all costs. That is their main job. And then the confidentiality, integrity are second to that, right? So I like to use the soup can as an example. It's easy to understand. For instance, it takes about 150 PLC type devices to make just one soup can, even before you even put food into that can. So on a normal day, companies can produce up to, say, 1 million cans. If one of those PLC devices goes down, then production comes to a halt. So as you can imagine, depending on how long this machine is down, it could cost the company a lot of money in revenue while downtime is happening. Q, can you go to the next slide? So next we will cover what happened to the OT landscape that kind of got us to this point where we really need to have OT specific protections and to have solutions in mind that understand what the OT devices are trying to achieve. The first thing that got us to this point was the convergence of IT and OT. This was kind of happening gradually within the environments naturally. Just to make everything easier for the people maintaining these environments, for remote monitoring or, doing your logging, linking to a SOC or a SIEM, opening up these communications between IT and OT. This was happening naturally. With COVID happening in 2020, this amplified the efforts of converging IT and OT, everybody being forced to be at home, but we still need to make money and make revenue for our environments. So there was a need to have opening up, there was a need to open up VPNs or tunnels and opening up holes into this environment that doesn't have typical protections, within the environment itself. Also, these are very vulnerable machines, being that a lot of times they don't have any sort of endpoint protection. They could be legacy machines, but whether it's Windows 7 or Windows XP, and they're not supported by Microsoft anymore, so they're very vulnerable just by design. And then also, one thing to keep in mind is that these environments were designed to be air-gapped, right? Network segmentation was their formal form of security. So once you start opening up these environments to everything naturally, that creates that is your threat vector, right? Opening it up, and you have to come up with a way to protect these machines that don't have a way to protect themselves. Go to the next slide, Q. So, and speaking of 2020, 2020 was one thing that really propelled this space into having something that you really needed to have protection, OT function for. We can see that in 2020, manufacturing was the third most hit with ransomware in these environments. Again, I mentioned before that this is because a lot of times these environments were opened up and there's just not any security down in these lower levels of the environment. And then also we can see on the left side there that the top operating system that was hit was a Windows 7 machine. Obviously, this is a legacy type environment or legacy type device, and we can see that this is only going to be a growing issue, and we need to come up with something that is going to actually be very specific on how we protect these. And then down on the left, we can see that less than 50% of the asset owners don't have any sort of AV down within the ICS type environment. Go to the next slide, Q. And this is more just a general understanding of where the threats were within the space. We can see pre-2014 that most of the attacks were state-sponsored attacks or advanced persistent threats, APTs, and that was kind of what was in the space before. WannaCry really opened up the eyes of the attackers just to see how vulnerable these environments were. Because the way the nature of how WannaCry is, it would, the attack would start on the IT side and then kind of bleed over into the OT side, where these devices aren't able to protect themselves and there's not really much protection there. So attackers see that this is basically easy pickings, And then after that, we start seeing that there's more attacks on the OT side after that. So WannaCry was kind of the propellant to that. Go ahead to the next slide, Q. So, and kind of understanding just what is going on with the environment, there's really 3 different threat types that we're trying to achieve. Go back one more, Q. Okay, yeah, so there's really 3 different threat types that we're trying to block. There's a number of different ways that we could, infect an environment within the OT side. I work a lot with Trend Micro's incident response team. So if there's a customer that we have that had an active outbreak, or a prospective customer that needs help with forensics or whatever, we may be doing it. There's an OT side to that that'll typically bring us in to help remediate, help come up with a plan of not letting it happen again. But the 3 most common threat types I see are these right here. The first one is what I kind of coined this term, I call it bleed over. Basically, it's an attack that starts in the OT levels of the network. And over here to the left, this is what is a Purdue model, if you don't know. And basically, it just has your IT levels at level 5 and level 4, and then anything lower than that, that is your OT environment. So bleed over is a threat. This is something that we see in the news a lot, where the threat will start on the IT side, it'll spread and does what it needs to do up there, and then it'll filter past either the firewall or IPS for a number of different reasons. And then once it gets into the OT environment, since there's not any lower level protections, it really kind of just runs rampant and then causes downtime within the environment. Again, this is the one that's the most common that you see in the news. And then number 2, go to the next one, Q, is the insider threat. So what this is it could be an internal person, it could be an external person, like a third-party vendor that's working on these machines, that is bringing in a laptop, bringing in a USB device or a piece of tooling equipment into the environment, bypassing your firewall, bypassing your IPS that may be up in the higher levels, and infecting the environment at the low levels, right? So they're bypassing the protection that you have, and they're infecting these machines at the lowest level of the environment. Now, if you don't have anything down here that can segregate or isolate these threats, this threat is able to run rampant and spread laterally or vertically, depending on how the environment's set up. And this is and within OT, this is the #1 way to shut down your operations environment. And then also one thing to keep in mind is that it's not necessarily just the people that are entering the space. It could also be a brand new piece of equipment, right? Or even a used piece of equipment that you're bringing into your environment that could be pre-infected and that you don't know of. I've seen where a customer will buy a brand new, say, a CNC machine that maybe have Windows 10 or Windows 7, and it'll be pre-infected from the manufacturer. So once they plug it into this environment, it's able to infect the machines that it has access to and infect the network. So the insider threat is the #1 thing that we're trying to shut down. This is the #1 way to shut down the OT environment, and we have to keep that in mind. The third one is what I call hijack device or hijacking the device's function. And there's 3 different ways that we can do this. The first way is hijacking a device to cause harm to the production or the quality of what we're trying to produce. I've seen where in the soda can industry that they'll cause the soda can to be just a hair thinner on the aluminum, and it'll cause the cans to start breaking down sooner, or they just don't have the quality and they just start denting or they collapse when they're on the pallets. That would be an example of hijacking the device of what a machine is supposed to do and making it cause harm to the quality of what we're trying to produce. The second thing.
Austen, I believe we lost your audio. Austen. Did we lose Austen entirely?
Okay, what point did I jump off? Sorry, my microphone went to sleep.
You've been silent for about 15 seconds, 15 to
Okay.
20.
Did you guys hear the hijack device output part?
Yes. Yep. About the cans. I think if you pick up
Okay,
from there.
yeah, so that's the
you.
harmful to production or harmful to the quality of what we're trying to produce. The second thing that's harmful or that we could hijack a device for would be to either cause the machine to catastrophically fail or to shut down and cause downtime there. The third thing that we can do would be harmful to the people within the environment or outside of the environment. The glaring example that we have is there was in 2021, there was a Florida water treatment plant they had a SCADA machine that was exploited by TeamViewer. That attacker was able to go in there and actually put extreme levels of chlorine into the water supply. Luckily, someone was watching them do these changes, and they were able to revert the levels back to normal. But that could have been very harmful or potentially fatal to the people within that environment. So these are the three main threat types that we're trying to achieve. The third one is specific to OT security. You have to have something in mind or some solution that understands what these devices are doing. So that way we can prevent things that aren't necessarily malicious as far as like a ransomware or a piece of malware, but harmful to the devices themselves and understanding what the device should be doing. So that way we can prevent things that are misused. Go ahead and go to the next slide. So the next thing is what it could cost you, right? If any of these attacks happen, and it's basically what downtime could cost you as a consumer, or it could cost your companies or your reputation, things like that. The first one is the most obvious one, is the loss of revenue. If your factory or your plant is shut down, you're losing money by the minute, right? I've seen companies that we work with that they were shut down in an entire region, and they're losing excess of $3 to $4 million a day, right? And the average outbreak that you see, typically, depending on how your disaster recovery is set up, but the typical downtime on average is about 21 days. So you got to ask yourself, can you afford to be shut down for 21 days? The next thing is, if you are infected with ransomware and you don't have a good backup plan as far as you're backing up your information or your configuration, you would have to pay the ransom cost while you're not making any money at the company. And then also the labor cost of remediating the threat, installing new protections. If you have to bring in a company to do your incident response that you're having to pay for, that's another added expense, all while you're not making any money as a company. The next two, these are more in the public space, is your reputation. If this does get out and it does need to have a release to the news or whatever it may be, your public reputation is damaged. You can have loss of trust in your customer base. And then the last thing is your economic loss. So typically, obviously the share and stock prices drop when a company has to come out and publicly announce that they were hit. Obviously, this can be recovered, but in the meantime, this is another cost of what the downtime caused. And at this point, I'll go ahead and hand it over to Q, which will hopefully help you to understand what we can do to prevent these types of things.
Perfect. Thanks, Austen. So now that we're a little bit scared and we've learned a little bit about some of the threats, facing our OT and ICS environments, as well as learning about some of the potential costs of downtime, let's start looking into some of the strategies and the ways that we can try to solve these problems that we just learned about. So here at TX1, we have a very specific approach to tackling the problems that we're all faced with when trying to secure an OT infrastructure. And so we believe that in order to solve OT security problems, you need to take an OT-focused zero trust approach, if you will. And so rather than focusing on the user like we do on the IT side, on the OT side of the house, we actually focus on the assets instead, since the assets are what's really important on the OT side of the house. And so we learn when these new assets arrive, when the supplier delivers that asset, delivers the equipment. We actually verify the integrity of that asset, the configuration of those assets. We start to learn the applications and the sensitive data that might be important to those assets. And then finally, when the new asset begins to communicate with other devices on the network, we actually start to learn about some of the protocols, the control commands, and even some of the parameters of the communication that's happening on the network. So throughout this learning process, we actually begin to, so we've learned the operation, we then start to build a policy baseline, and then eventually we begin to be able to enforce those policies to fortify the operational continuity of our OT infrastructure. And so with that, we've kind of developed and through our experiences and in response to attack trends and real world incidents that we've seen, we've developed a framework of best practices we believe that are very important, like I said, based on our experience with real customer engagements around the world. And so we came up with these best practices, and we'll talk more about each of these and why they're important on the OT side. And so to start with, network segmentation is arguably one of the most important things that you need to be looking at on the OT side. And so segmentation is always the key to contain impact scope during a potential attack. Without good network segmentation, your critical production lines, they can be affected accidentally by other incidents. In maybe a non-critical production line, your critical production lines could be affected. And like Austen alluded to, without segmentation, there may be some commands that aren't necessarily malicious that accidentally get sent out and can affect your environment. Next, we believe virtual patching is very important. We understand that it's a never-ending game to patch your assets, and even more so on the OT side of things, there's going to be a lot of legacy operating systems and applications that never will be patched again. And so you need to have the capability to have a virtual patching capability to help shield your vulnerable assets, to help block some lateral movement in your OT environment, and that can be done with virtual patching technology. Next, we have trust listing. All right, just got them in my something. And really what this is a whitelisting strategy to ensure that only allowed applications or allowed network traffic is allowed in your environment. And so what this can do is it can prevent execution of any unwanted applications or unwanted network traffic, really to prevent incidents ahead in your environment. And we'll talk more about each of these and why they're important. Next, we're going to have, you're going to need to be able to harden your critical assets. And so you need to be able to keep your mission critical assets operational with OT aware security solutions. And so as you're going to have legacy assets, you're also going to have modern assets that have constant changes. You need to be able to protect both of those types of assets in your environment with OT aware security specific solutions. And lastly, we believe periodic inspection is very important. Austen alluded to one of the biggest attack vectors is outside people, contractors, and assets. And so we believe you should have a mechanism to constantly audit the assets as they enter, before they enter your production areas, when they're active in your production lines, and when they're delivered downstream to other vendors or customers. So to dive a little bit deeper, let's start with network segmentation. So network segmentation provides the capability to segment your ICS networks, the topology into different zones. And so really what this does is it helps to mitigate risk, it can prevent outbreaks, and it can repel intra-zone attacks in your environment. So network segmentation groups your vulnerable assets into operations-friendly safe zones. And so you can prevent attackers from moving, prevent malware from moving and spreading, and even prevent commands that may not be really malicious from spreading in your environment and doing things they're really not supposed to be able to do. You also need to be able to do and implement this network segmentation without causing and changing any OT network architecture. And so you should be able to deploy your device and start implementing this segmentation immediately without any interruption. And so this typically isn't possible with an IT-based solution. Most of the segmentation techniques on the IT side of the house, they're typically going to require network reconfiguration. And if they don't, they're typically very, very costly to achieve and implement. With network segmentation, you can also split your network up into more easily defended zones based on which assets do or do not need to communicate with each other. And so you need to use an OT native solution that can create protocol-based policies to determine, what kind of commands can be sent, can go in or out, which assets can communicate with each other. And so with that deep level and protocol-based, OT protocol-based policies, you can prevent misoperation in addition to malicious traffic. And so really this is going to require that deep support for the OT protocols that the worksite assets are using in your environment. So typically an IT solution is not going to have that deep of an OT protocol knowledge. And on the OT side of things, there's going to be many different form factors that are required based on your different production lines and OT networks. And so you might need a non-typical type of deployment and hardware piece that typically is not available on the IT side of things. Next, we have virtual patching. And really what this is designed to do is to shield your assets at a network level to secure the vulnerabilities in your legacy or any other unpatched or unpatchable assets without interrupting their work. And so we understand that updating assets depends on a ton of different factors. Is the patch available? If it's available, is it compatible? Does your OT environment allow for the asset to be patched? Even on the IT side of things, patching can be time consuming and very tough to schedule and implement. And on the OT side of things, it's even worse, as in reality, every time something goes offline, that can have immediate revenue impacts. And so you need to be able to have a mechanism in place to secure and protect these vulnerable assets without the ability to patch. And so we understand the asset status and the patch status are major obstacles to the maintenance products. And so even for your assets that will eventually receive an official patch, they can use virtual patching technology to reduce the risk until it's the right time for an update and a vendor supplied patch has been released and more importantly has been tested to work inside of your environment. So through virtual patching, you can secure your assets regardless of whether or not their creator has released a security update. Your unpatchable and legacy assets can be secured without changes to their configurations. They don't need to be upgraded. They can still be protected. And the OT native IPSs and firewalls in this case that can make this kind of asset-centric cyber defense possible have rule sets specifically designed to repel attacks without forcing your assets to conduct an update to so there's not going to be any system reboots and there's going to be no production downtime. Next, let's get into trust listing, which is one of the more effective ways of securing the OT side of the house. So the trust lists, they secure both your endpoints and your networks alike by specifying what actions, what assets, what applications are trusted and blocking everything else. And so OT Zero Trust is based on using trust lists to manage your application privileges on the endpoints and asset privileges on networks. So let's start a little bit on the network trust list. And so by deploying network trust lists, your asset communications and their privileges, they can be strictly limited to those necessary to carry out their work. And so they're going to be based on OT protocols. So you need to have a solution that understands OT protocols, but not just from a visibility perspective. They need to be able to understand and see down into the function code level and actually be able to enforce what type of network communications and function codes can be sent and received from specific devices in your environment. And so once you have that functionality, only the approved commands can be sent at a network level. And what this does is it actually prevents both malicious tampering and misoperation in your environment. On the endpoint side, especially for your fixed use and legacy assets, which is very common on the endpoint side of the house, a trustless-based approach is one of the most effective ways to protect these legacy and these fixed function devices. And so a trust list is used to guarantee that only the applications related to that endpoint's operational role can run. And so this allows the applications that are already approved and verified to be excluded from the scans, and so they can work undisturbed. And anything else on that machine isn't going to be able to run. And so you won't be able to infect it because another executable or piece of malware can't actually function on these assets. This is super important for those legacy operating systems, especially those Windows 2000, those XP devices out there. An IT-based endpoint protection solution typically isn't going to work on those operating systems. They typically are no longer supported. If they are supported, it's kind of an afterthought, and typically they're going to still require internet access and so forth, whereas a trust listing type of solution is not. And so really conducive for those legacy operating systems and a purpose-built OT approach to do that. Next, we have our, we can harden our critical assets as well. So if you can't take a trust list approach and a lockdown approach on your assets on the OT side, and you have more what we would call a modern OT solution, which in our mind is going to be Windows 7 and up, you need to be able to still protect these more modern OT solutions. And so for these modernized machines that have more resources, and they must stay flexible when conducting a wider variety of tasks, trust listing may not be the right answer for these, but it can be supplemented by a solution that has machine learning, and it uses next generation endpoint protection technology, but it also has the ability to implement a library of approved ICS applications and certificates. And so what this is going to do is allow the applications that are on that approved list to be excluded from scans so that they can work undisturbed. Meanwhile, the machine learning and the next generation endpoint protection capabilities have the ability to spot the suspicious behaviors related to cyber threats without disturbing trust listed processes. So really your endpoint solution should be able to prevent and detect advanced malware, and it should be able to protect your ICS applications and ensure the integrity of those applications are not affected. We understand that machines work all day, every day, 24 hours per day. And so productivity is key and safety is critical. So performance degradation because of an endpoint solution is not tolerable. So your solution cannot impact performance whatsoever. These OT solutions do need to be able to support legacy operating systems and be able to run and perform effective security without requiring constant updates, which can bring down the asset. And it should be able to function effectively without requiring internet access to do so, like a more traditional IT endpoint security solution. Lastly, we'll get into our security inspection piece and talk a little bit more. So OT Zero Trust begins with the asset lifecycle the moment the device enters the worksite. And so attackers, like Austen said, often get the threats into the OT environments by making use of a trusted third party's ability to introduce threats. Supply chain attacks can be set off by attackers hiding malware in an asset before the vendor even ships it. And so, right, we've seen that these supply chain attacks can actually impact thousands of companies overnight, and also to prevent insider threats from outside contractors and supply chain attacks introduced through the onboarding of the assets. You need to be able to implement a security inspection process for scanning these devices as they enter the worksite. And so, how do you do that? What you need to be able to have is a security inspection tool that can integrate your asset scans and your inventories to make sure everything inside of your environment is scanned as they're onboarded, as they're deployed in your production environment, in the air gap zones, and as they're brought back for maintenance. And then finally, before they're sent back out, potentially to to end customers further down the line. And so what you can do with a system like this is you can actually scan all these type of devices, and it will create a record for each of these devices and assets. And what you can do is guarantee that each of these assets and these devices that connect to your network are free and clear of malware. You have an asset visibility report on each of those assets. And so by conducting these scans with a portable scanning type of device, that can be taken from machine to machine. The scans of your standalone and air gap systems can be tracked from a centralized console. And the other use case here is that you're going to have some standalone systems that are very difficult to scan due to maybe industry regulations that don't allow software installation. You can use a handheld portable scanning device to enable that malware scanning and cleanup to be conducted from the stick. And so you should constantly and consistently be able to scan assets before they enter production areas, when they are active in production lines, and when they are under maintenance with a security inspection tool. So now that we've learned about the strategies and the best practices for implementing Zero Trust, what do the products look like and what type of functionality can we provide from the TX1 network side of things? So product-wise, we operate really in three different verticals, if you will. Really, this is designed for us to be adaptive. We understand that each individual customer's site is going to be completely different and their needs are going to be different. And even inside of an OT network, production line to production line is going to be different as well. There's going to be different types of needs. And so we've come up with three different solution sets to kind of meet our customers' needs. And so if they have endpoints or assets that can install software, we can actually go down that route. If they have a need for more of a network-based solution because they can't install anything, we have that. And then finally, we have a solution to provide that agentless malware and asset inspection. So let's start with that, known as our portable security series. And really what this is a malware scanner in the USB form factor. And so it has an antivirus engine built in. And it's really designed to scan your inbound and outbound devices, scan your air gap systems, and it also has the ability to provide a secure file transfer mechanism as well. And so no software installation is required. So on your target systems, this allows you can perform on-demand security scans whenever and wherever required on any of your critical assets. We designed it to be very, very easy operation. Plug it in and scans. And so your employees, your shop floor managers, or operators, they don't need to have any type of security background to run this tool. You plug it in, it's going to have lights on it that's going to tell you the status, and it's going to do its thing, and then you can unplug it and move on. This also, the Portable Security series, does support a variety of platforms, and so it supports both Windows and Linux devices. And the other great part about this solution is it does support air-gapped environments, and so not only will it scan those air-gapped solutions, but it will collect detailed snapshots of the asset data, including computer information, maybe Windows update statuses and application lists. And then Portable Security can actually feed that data back to a management program to enhance your asset view. Next, on the endpoint protection side of things, we have what's known as our Stellar series, and we offer two different flavors depending on the use case and the requirements in the environment. So first, we have our solution for more of the modernized assets in your environment, known as Stellar Protect. And so this is going to provide, that next generation antivirus capability. It's going to leverage machine learning and behavior monitoring to learn and build security baseline from an asset perspective in order to identify and block anomalous behaviors on your endpoint. But it's going to take a very OT specific approach. And what it's going to do is it's going to auto recognize thousands of different OT applications on your endpoint and whitelist and secure the integrity of those applications so they are constantly protected, but also that their performance is not degraded and the function that they do is not impeded whatsoever. And then it's going to apply our advanced techniques to the rest of the activity on that endpoint. Our other form of solution is called Stellar Enforce, and this is really more for your legacy assets, your Windows XPs, your 2000s, your Windows 7s. And this is really designed for your fixed function devices, your devices that aren't receiving updates any longer. And if they do receive any updates or do any maintenance, it's usually very scheduled out. And so Stellar Enforce is a 4-in-1 lockdown type of approach, application lockdown solution to basically prevent and harden your asset, to prevent unauthorized change of your critical applications, your files, your registries, as well as hardening and protecting USB as well across both of these different flavors. Both of these solutions, very minimal downtime, They are designed specifically for the OT environment, as we consider operation continuity as the first priority. So neither of these solutions require a reboot. You can install and get them up and running immediately. Then lastly, we have our Edge series. And our Edge series is our network prevention-based solution. Really what they're designed to do is to provide intrusion prevention capabilities and network segmentation inside of your OT environment, all the way down to the OT protocol control level. They provide extensive support for OT protocols, even down in that function code level, that allows these devices to filter your control commands within the protocols, and they can block traffic not defined in your policy rules. And so we can control access with IPs and protocols, but we can also control behavior with the Edge series. They are very non-disruptive, and they do not require network reconfiguration to be able to deploy in your environment. They do contain the capability, what we call an ICS foresight strike, and so you can auto-learn the network activity happening in your environment and automatically provide and build out policies for your network. They come in a variety of form factors, and so they can be deployed depending on the use case, all the way down to a deck of card sized device and up into server grade and server sized solution. And all of the solutions have a form of either hardware bypass or the ability to deploy an HA. So if a device were to go down, we would not impede network traffic. And so we can spend a lot of time on each of these solutions. We'd love to talk a little bit more about them for anyone that is interested in learning more. But that's kind of a brief primer of what we can do with our TX1 solutions. And so to wrap things up, just to kind of give a little summary of what we learned today, we learned that the ICS and OT environments are becoming increasingly vulnerable and targeted, right? We see that in the Ukraine crisis right now. We've learned about the damaging consequences from ICS downtime. We also learned some of the differences between IT and OT cybersecurity strategies. They're very different and they require different types of solution. Then finally, I introduced you to TX1 solutions that are purpose-built to protect your OT environments while keeping your operations up and running. And with that, I'll pass it back to you, Jim.
Perfect. Thank you, Quentin, and Austen as well. Great information, a lot of information today, and covered it in a very quick and efficient amount of time. Thank you. Just a quick reminder to everyone on the call, we do have some Q&A that we're going to get to in just a moment. And if you have any other questions, please go ahead and click that Q&A icon at the top of the bar and ask your questions here. And again, we'll get to those in just a minute. We want to thank you all for attending today's webinar. Again, a lot of information covered. We're eager to help you in developing your cybersecurity, your OT cybersecurity strategy specifically. And we want to continue to be a resource for you. So with that in mind, we've got a slide up here showing a little picture of something that Quentin was just talking about, our Portable Security 3 device. And what we want to offer anyone on this or any organization on this call today is if you set up a follow-up meeting or a consultation with us, we will send you a Portable Security 3 device and licensing for a set amount of time so that you can get a taste of what the TX1 protection and what this device in particular is all about and how it can help you really begin that journey of securing some of your OT assets. So again, if you're able to set up a meeting or consultation with us, this is something that we want to offer you. And I believe we're going to put a poll question up to just give everyone the opportunity real quick to basically answer, yes, I would like a follow-up meeting. And we'll go ahead and get that scheduled. It's completely anonymous. Nobody's going to see everything. Derek, can you do that for us? Perfect. Thank you. Also, some of you, I'm sure you may remember that we're shipping you some TX1 tumblers to anyone who attended the live session today as a thank you. If you provided your shipping address during registration, then you're all set. If you didn't, please feel free to share it with me after today's call, my email address is Jim_Berry, that's BERRY, at TX1, that's the letter T, letter X, ONE.com. Also, we do have, we're very interested in your feedback. We're going to put up another poll here in a moment, just to, if you could help us out by giving us a quick rating of the value of today's session in that poll question. We'd love to hear anything specific you think we can do better. And we'll post that here in a moment and leave it up as we jump into the Q&A. So there were already some great questions right out of the gate. I'm going to read a couple of them off here, and if you have anything else, if anyone else has questions, please feel free to go ahead and add them. One of the questions we received was, how does virtual patching impact the OS to application compatibility? Security patching updates impact CNC operations. For example, Windows 10 patches completely break some of the applications we operate. Austen, would you mind fielding that?
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, we understand that there's a number of different reasons why we don't want to patch these devices. The common thing that I hear a lot is, if it ain't broke, don't fix it, right? So introducing a new patch to a Windows 10 or a Windows 2008 or whatever it may be could cause issues and cause the machine to crash and completely fail. Obviously, we don't want that. So a lot of times you'll see Windows 10 that are still on base build, and Windows 10 has been out for 6 years. There's a lot of things that device is vulnerable to, exploit-wise, vulnerability-wise. And then also, if it's a legacy machine, it's just not supported by Microsoft anymore, but there's still exploits and vulnerabilities coming out for that. So what we are doing is virtual patching is within our product side. We're basically a man in the middle on this, and so that way, when an attack does come through, we're pulling out those malicious executables from the packets if we're on the network side, and protecting that device that can't protect itself, whether it's just that it hasn't been patched or it hasn't been, or that it's a legacy machine. So it's not necessarily something that we're pushing a patch to the device itself. We're basically sitting in front of it, and we could either be alerted to it if we're in a monitoring mode, or we could actually prevent it if we're in a prevention mode, just to prevent that machine from going down.
Perfect. Thank you, Austen. Another question that came in, excellent question. How does TX1 software impact older machines, such as XP machines already performance challenged due to running at 100% RAM and CPU utilization? Quentin, can you field that one for us? Oh, I'm sorry, yeah. Austen, I think you had answered that. I apologize.
Yeah, no worries. Yeah, so this is exactly what we knew going into it, right? So in the past, customers were using IT style AV in the OT environments, and IT style AV does not care about the resources on the machine. It is going to do what it needs to do. And if you're lacking resources, or it's a legacy operating system, it could cause the machine to crash or not operate properly, right? So when we developed our software, especially our more traditional AV, we made it extremely, extremely lightweight. And then for the extremely taxed devices, we have a lockdown protection, which Q covered, that when it's in its lockdown mode, it's essentially using 0 CPU strength to provide that lockdown. It does have some AV scanning capabilities, but if that is an issue, we have 2 different options that we can do. One is more lightweight, but it's a more traditional AV. It does your real-time scanning, behavior monitoring, things like that. That still uses some resources, but if you do have machines that are extremely taxed, we have another solution that's a lockdown whitelisting application that can do the same thing and protect that machine as well.
Perfect. Thanks, Austen. And it looks like we do have the poll, another poll question up as far as your rating and any suggestions as to what we might be able to do a little bit better next time. And we certainly appreciate that feedback. I don't see any other questions in the Q&A. We are getting pretty close on the end of our time together, so I do want to be conscious of that. What I would ask again is, if you do have any questions following this webinar, please feel free to reach out to your Trend Micro rep, your account manager, or reach out again to me directly. Email again one more time is Jim_Berry, BERRY, at tx1.com. Always happy to talk to you. and schedule demos, meetings, whatever might be helpful for you or your team. And
Hey, Jim, there's also one more question in there if you want to read
okay,
it.
gotcha, great, good. I did not see that. Thanks for catching.
Yeah, so the question is yes, there will be a recording of this that we can share with you guys, anybody that attended, if you guys want to rewatch it. And then also, well, I know that abbreviations and acronyms can be very confusing, so we can share information. We can share that information on what the acronyms and then also what different features we have within our environment to help with that.
Perfect. Thanks, Austen.
No problem.
Quentin, thank you for your presentation. We appreciate it. Does anyone else have any other Q&A questions they'd like to post in the chat before we let you go? Okay, please keep in mind. Oh wait, I see another post. Terrific. And there, that's what. Sorry, I'm lagging behind a little bit, I think. So, Austen, you just answered that. So thank you for that question. And just a quick reminder on that portable security device. If you schedule a meeting with us, we're happy to send you one of those and help you walk through it and understand the capabilities as well. So thanks everyone for your time today. Please reach out if you have any questions, and hope to see you at another webinar down the line. Thank you. Take care.